I'm still good here.
Well, hey, everybody. Welcome to tonight's show. Mike Griffith here on our Ingles on the Beat Monday. Very pleased to be joined by Georgia's swim and diving coach, Jack Bauerle. And Jack, thank you so much for joining us tonight, Coach. And congratulations, news coming out that you've been appointed to the Olympic staff.
Well, that's the good news. The better news is that we had 6 athletes make it and 3 more that had a Georgia imprint on them also. And so basically, when we get to Tokyo, we'll have probably about a 17% part of the team that is related to the University of Georgia. So, Mike, we had you want your best performances to come in the most important times. This was the most important time, and we had our best performance.
Together, there'll be 7, as you said, 7 former Georgia swimmers, a couple more that train in Georgia, even a former Florida Gator. I said, I don't know what to do with Natalie Hines. She went to Florida, but she wears the Georgia cap, and she trains with the Pro Dogs program at Ramsey here in Athens. But amazing to see 7 former Georgia swimmers. That's the highest number of swimmers from any collegiate program. They're going to be a part of Team USA and Tokyo. And Coach, you've done this a long time. Now, I know that 43 years, you're the dean of SEC coaches, man. I mean, that's amazing. I guess before we dive into, no pun intended, all the Olympic talk here, did you think when you first made a splash in coaching that you'd land for 43 years in this profession?
No, it's sort of funny when you say 43 years. My wife, Leanne, always says, don't say that. It sounds like you're older than you really are. Well, you probably know the story. Coach Dooley gave me an opportunity when I was 27. And anyhow, and to answer your question more directly, I had no earthly idea. I was just trying to survive. And I had a great athletic director who was patient. And, that $8,000 salary I had in 1979 changed quickly to $15,000 4 years later. So.
I mean, 43 years for a coach in any sport. I guess I would ask you again, and we're going to get to the Olympic talk in a moment, but when we think about 43 years in swimming, what would be some of the biggest changes over that time? I mean, obviously the times just keep crashing down. The swimmers get, faster, more efficient, seemingly. You wonder how they can squeeze any more out of themselves. But as far as training methods or swimming itself, when I ask you, what are some of the biggest changes that have impacted the sport over these 43 years? What would come to mind for you?
I think the thing that would come to mind first that would resonate with everybody that's not real familiar with swimming is the fact that we just trained them differently. We used to train much more as far as miles are concerned. And you say you swim a little bit, so you know how long a mile takes. But we swim a little bit more quality oriented, a little bit more what I would say race pace. So I always make a joke with some of my former swimmers that swam for me in the 80s and the 90s. I don't think I've rested them yet. They're still tired from what I did to them. So that's, and the strokes have changed. We swim a little bit downhill. Mike, you're doing your swim out in Watkinsville there. Make sure your head, make sure you're looking down, not straight forward on your freestyle. I mean, it's little things like that. And backstroke, the stroke has changed. The breaststroke, the stroke has changed. And everything is evolving. But we also know a lot more about the energy systems. Like for tomorrow, I have to make up a practice that stresses a whole different part of their energy system than it would what we did today. So there's a lot of science involved in it too. Just as you probably know, you followed all the sports. Anything at the highest level is much more complicated than people think.
Oh, there's no question. There's absolutely a science to it, right down to what you eat, when you eat. Certainly, the hydration. It truly is a science. And covering Michael Phelps and Lochte at the London Olympics, and Davis Tarwater, a guy that you and I both have in common. It's such a small world in the swimming world. I was fascinated, to hear about all the different training methods as I crammed to learn all I could about swimming. And I'm telling you, as I admitted to you before we started the show, when I first got that assignment to cover the trials in Omaha in 2012, I had no idea, what I was in for, right? I thought I was in over my head in the deep end, but so I had to do some research, and the research didn't do the sport justice. I guess, Coach, the thing that's just so fascinating to me and so exciting and exhilarating about the U.S. Olympic swim trials, it's once every 4 years. There's no automatic times. There's no backing in, and you better have a good day that day. Or it's 4 more years later. I guess I would ask you, to me, there would have to be a lot of psychology to that. And as someone that's, gosh, I'm looking at this, I think, how many athletes have you sent? I mean, Jake sent me this stuff here. I'm looking at what you've produced here, 12 SEC crowns, 61 different men and women members, winning 174 national championships at the NCAA. Your team's posted 48 top 10 finish. I mean, this is just what you've done, where you've coached. I mean, yes, you're on this year's Olympic team, and you're no stranger to this, though. In 2008, you were chosen as the women's team coach for the Olympics, led the American women to 14 medals, the most of any nation, including going to the Beijing Games. You coached Team USA in the last 6 Olympic Games. You're kind of a fixture here. So I guess I ask you, what do you tell these swimmers, these athletes, to get them at their peak so they're not freaking out? Because I would be thinking once every 4 years, there'd be a lot of nerves there.
There are a lot of nerves all the time. And I cannot – the last 2 months in our pool at the Ramsey Center, you could cut the tension with a knife. Everything – warm-up had to be done correctly. I was in a different – out of all those years that you've been talking about, I was in a situation this year at Olympic trials that I've never been in, and I welcomed it in some ways, and I was scared to death of it in another way, because I knew it could have a perfect ending or a not-so-perfect ending or somewhere in between. I had three of the best male breaststrokers in the entire country training with me here for the last 2 years, one of whom was mine, 2 of whom went to another school. So they came here to train with my pro group, because we literally have the best pro group. It's one of the great secrets in our town. We have the best pro group of swimmers in the world right here in Athens. Wow. So to give you an idea, in one of the events, I had a swimmer get first. So he's on the Olympic team. Second, he was on the Olympic team. And another one that was 4th by only 3/10. So we had 3 guys competing for those spots. And so it's sort of like trying to pick your favorite child. And, you're committed to making sure what they do, you do the best thing you can for each one of them. But they also train differently. And they're all not created equal, especially on the last 3 or 4 weeks of the season. Some of them rest a little bit differently. They have different body types. Some of whom, I had one boy that's 6'6". I have another one that's 5'11". And so you have to do different stuff for different folks. But what you mentioned more than anything else, it's up to us and we gear everything in from 4 years. We gear everything into those 8 days in Omaha. And it all comes down to that.
Yeah, and it's fascinating. And here's the numbers right here, Coach Bauerle. 85 Olympians you've produced from Georgia, representing 20 different nations, 31 medals. Georgia swimmers have earned 14 gold medals. That's more than in some countries. And folks maybe not know this, that don't follow it closely. The swim trials are actually more competitive than the Olympic Games, Coach. The United States, this is one sport that the United States still dominates the world, correct?
The Olympic trials to us are much hard. Is a much harder competition than the Olympic Games because the pressure of making that team is off the map. So you can be top 3 in the world. Heck, you could be number 1 in the world, and if your day is not the right day, you're not swimming at the Olympic Games. So by the time right now, I can just tell in the first day of back training here on Monday, when we swam here twice today, they are much more relaxed, and they know they made the team. And it's not, they don't let up because these are the kind of kids who want a medal also. But the Olympic trials in itself is the greatest meet and the worst meet, because you got to remember, there are about 800 or 900 kids there, and you pick 40 some out of that, and everyone else is miserable. So it's pretty tough because most of the kids that are there, they spent their whole life having the Olympic dream. So it's and whether it's realistic or not, even when they get there, they sure as heck want to be on an Olympic team because they know that everything that comes with it. But this going to the Olympic Games is where it gets hard too, Mike. I mean, just family wise and otherwise. I leave Sunday for Honolulu. We'll have 2.5 weeks there in a training camp, and that's pretty much a lockdown. It's not like we'll be frolicking out on Waikiki, and then after that we go into Japan, one little small spot in Japan, and then finally into the village. So basically, it's about a 5.5 week commitment. I'll be out of here.
Wow, it's fascinating. Some of the guys on this year's team, Team USA, Georgia alums, Chase Calise. Did I say his last name right? Chase is
yep.
Chase Calise, Nick Fink. Yep. I see Jay Litherland, Gunnar Bentz also got confirmed. I see the Pro Dog Andrew Wilson, an Emory student that trains with the Pro Dog Club, as you said, the best professional swim club in the world, right here in our backyard in Athens. And then the women's team, 4 Bulldogs, right? Allison Schmidt, just the 7th swimmer in American history to compete in 4 Olympic. I mean, what a fascinating story. Olivia Smoliga, I think that's how you pronounce that. Hale Flickinger also made it. And then Natalie Hines, we talked about Natalie, the Florida Gator that swims up here. She wears the Georgia cap, and I'm like, that's got to count for something, right? And then of course you've got some folks from other countries. It looks like Javier Esfedo is swimming going to try to make the Canadian team, I believe, as well as Olivia Anderson. So it's interesting swimming such an international sport. I guess I would kind of maybe take a sidebar there and ask you this. I mean, I think it's fair to say that most sidewalk alum and even alums, you always say, man, get the best swimmers out of Georgia, coach. I don't know that you can win with just the best swimmers in Georgia. And when we're talking about a national championship caliber Olympic athlete producing program like Georgia, it's no different than what Kirby's trying to do. The best want to play against the best. The best want to train with the best. Iron sharpens iron. How do you balance giving that Georgia kid, and I know you've got a few, versus getting that international kid that can blow up the scoreboard and win you some SEC and national titles?
Well, it's pretty easy. Can they help us win?
Yeah.
That's the biggest thing. And if they're committed, I don't care where they're from, who they are, who their mom and dad were. I don't care if they have brothers or sisters, just as long as they can swim and work hard. The young lady, it's funny you mentioned Natalie Hines, who I would have died to swim for me here at the University of Georgia. And she quit swimming. She went to, down south of the border there with the Florida Gators, and we probably would have won another 1 or 2 national championships with her. So all of a sudden, she's out of swimming. She's sitting behind a desk in Atlanta, miserable, and she calls me up, and I didn't answer. And I didn't answer about 3 or 4 times. And finally, she text messaged my assistant coach and said, is he going to answer or what? Or do I have to drive up there? I knew what she wanted. So I was trying to make sure she was actually committed to it. And she was persistent. And if there's one trait I love persistence. And she's a great athlete. And so in a year and 3/4, she went from working behind a desk. Now she's made her dream. And the irony was not lost to me, as you said. I told her, I said, seeing you make an Olympic team with a G on your hat, I was fine. So that makes up for you going anywhere. But she's, you know, I think you have one job too. You really want anyone that you coach, wherever they came from, just to help them be the best at what they can do and be, especially when they're that committed. The young man from Emory is a story, Mike. He's the first Division III athlete ever to make the Olympic Games. Oh, and in swimming, yeah, I'm not sure. I think it might be across the board. But here's what he did. He had a couple schools to go to. He was the engineering athlete, or not student athlete, but student of the year at Emory. And he had two schools. He used one for a backup just in case he didn't get in. The other one was the one he really wanted to get in. So he picked MIT and Oxford. So he used MIT as the backup, and he got in Oxford for engineering. And these are the kind of kids we have. These are not average kids. These are unbelievable adults now. And he put his life on hold now for 4 years. And the hardest thing that happened last year, Mike, was when we had the rug pulled out from us from the Olympic Games, and the kids that were 26, 27, and in this case, a couple cases, 28 years old, they put their whole life on hold, and that put even more pressure on this year. So, my hats are off to these guys that got it done again, and we were frantic this time last year. I was in 2 backyard pools, Carl Senowit's pool, Gary Avon's pool, two guys that had pools in their backyards that were almost 20 yards long. We had to find water, and we found some out in Watkinsville at Summer Hill. And so we had to be in there, one person at one end. I think our kids did the best job of handling last summer more than anyone else in the country. And I think that's why we have so many on the Olympic team. The hats off to them, because it was not easy, because during that same time, we were swimming when the Olympics were supposed to be happening. So there was a lot of emotion in that pool.
Yeah, you got to keep that momentum up, and there's really no time to break in the training, as we talked about. Once every 4 years, it's all about building for that moment. And Coach Bauerle joining us here tonight on our Angles on the Beach show. These accomplishments, Coach, and you didn't come on here for me to mention this, but this is mind blowing. We think about coaching 10 years and competing for championships. The Georgia women have won 7 NCAA national championships. They've had 8 NCAA runner-up finishes. I mean, these are mind-numbing numbers. 12 SEC titles, 7-time NCAA Coach of the Year, 16-time SEC Coach of the Year. That's just the women. The men, 2-time Coach of the Year for the men, 21 NCAA championship individual winners. I mean, these numbers at this point, you got to be just going, yeah. I mean, you just keep, but when you build and I got to think that, when you have this amount of tenure, credibility, equity built up, and yet the swimmers keep coming to you, not just University of Georgia, but as you said, the best pro club in the nation in Athens. How do you stay on top of the game? Because as we talked about, I mean, there's an absolute science to this, whether we're talking about, I don't even know if engineering is the right word for the strokes, but we talked about the diet. We talked about the training schedule. We talked about, how you had to ad lib to get your athletes, your swimmers through this difficult COVID time that derailed so many others. How do you stay on edge, and how do you keep pushing yourself after 43 years?
Well, I think more than anything else, I get a lot of help. I have some great assistant coaches, Steph Williams, Neil Versfeld, Brian Smith, Jerry Champer, who is married to Lou, our softball coach. Yeah. And I think you have to have great help, because I think any coach realizes there's things that you do well and there's things that you don't do well. And I have some coaches that do some things that can help my swimmers that do it a lot better than I can. The thing that I'd like to probably concentrate on is the building of confidence is the biggest thing that you can possibly do. That doesn't come easily because, first of all, they have to work hard to do it. But I think that is the biggest game changer from when someone making a change in a level. So we really have to do the job with them. And we also have to change a little bit, Mike. I'm not the same coach as I was 5 years or 10 years ago. My athletes now need a little bit more interaction. And then my pro group, they need a lot more entertainment too. I mean, they're older and so every day I put something on the workout, like at this day in history. It's usually sports, of course, but they make fun of me because, as you probably know, I'm a Philly guy, and I came here in school in 1970. If people ask me what other college, what other school I like besides Georgia, it's a real easy answer: none. And they asked me if I like any teams besides the Eagles and the Phillies, Sixers, Flyers, none. So anyhow, we do a little thing in there. We always put something on, and the joke is among all the swimmers that about 1 out of 10 has something to do with Wilt Chamberlain. So anyhow, but you have to have fun, and you have to have the coaches that sort of fill in the spots, like Jerry and a couple of Brian especially, and Neil. They were much technically they're better than I ever was. But the other thing to stay sharp is 2 of my best friends are 2 of the best coaches I've ever met. And one was at Texas, just retired. He won 12, 14 NCAAs. And another one was at Arizona. And so we talk all the time. We compete against each other. I mean, one of my swimmers just knocked his swimmer out by a couple tenths of a second off an Olympic team, but we still talk all the time. And that's how we learn. We have risen above that. On the statistics part that you were talking about, the one thing that I really like, our men have had just an inordinate amount of success, but they're sort of like the redheaded stepchild, but the biggest thing we did was we were first or second 15 out of 18 years with the ladies. So if you put that in basketball terms, we were in the final game 15 out of 18 years. Wow. So, and then the years that we were bad, we were in the Elite 8, another time in the Final 4, and another time in the Elite 8. So, and the other thing was we had a great run with the dual meets. We lost the second meet in the Ramsey Center that we ever had in 1995. We didn't lose another one on the women's side at home until 21 years later. And that was, wow. That's stuff special, because it's greatness, I think, is with your kids. If it's over a period of time and then you have a program, it's sort of like what we're watching right now with Kirby too. People, we got to appreciate it. And I was here with Coach Dooley, and I just always saw just so well coached teams. I mean, I fell in love. One reason I'm here, I fell in love with Georgia football back in 1968 when I was 16, and we went 8-0-2. We had 2 ties against Tennessee and Houston that year. I was already following Georgia. I don't know how the heck I did it. And as you know, it's harder to do it then than it is now. We had to find it in a newspaper.
Yeah, no, the cable TV wasn't going. I guess I would ask you that. When I look at Georgia football, and I bounced around the SEC and had an opportunity to go and cover some great teams. And, one great team leads to a bigger newspaper, And, now I'm at a place that a lot of people, well, now you're at the top, Mike, you're at Georgia, you've done Alabama, Auburn, and Tennessee. And those were great beats, but certainly, Cox Enterprises in Atlanta is, really about as great a news organization as it gets. And I just think to myself how unique Georgia is in this way, Coach, and maybe you can lend some insight to me. I can't think of another market that I've worked in where all the former football coaches, and I just talked with Coach Rick a few days ago. I spoke with Jim Donnan last month. I spoke with Coach Goff last month. Of course, we see Coach Dooley in the facility. They're all still here. And you've been here for the tenure of all of them. And what would you say? What's the tie that binds? Why are all the football coaches still in Athens, and what's created this unique environment for Georgia athletics?
First of all, everyone you mentioned there are exceptional.
Yeah.
Every one of them. Coach Dooley is special in every way. I saw him, though. I visited him, so we took a walk around the gardens, as you know, and because now he's a horticultural expert also. That's and yeah, we had two world acclaimed horticulturists here, Mike Durr and Alan Armitage, who thought they were retired until Coach Dooley found them. And so, but and then Ray, I've known since he was here. We were buddies then. We're buddies now. I saw Ray just 2 weeks ago at the post office. We talked for about 30 minutes. Jim, I saw today. Donnan, Jim and I play tennis when everything's going right. And condolences to him, as you well know, because his wife, many years married, just passed, a week plus ago. And they had the service on Monday. When I was at, he sent it to me, so I got a chance to see it. I saw him. I went to visit Jim the night before I actually left for the Olympic trials. I was over his house, and he was telling some great football stories. And then where we are right now, this is Mark Richt's old house. So, yeah. So I have a fun relationship with them all. And I think, I think they just all fell in love with Georgia. Coach came from Auburn, Coach Dooley, but, Ray was Moultrie, as you well know, and Mark. I got to tell you, Mark was just remarkable to be around all the time. People say they say how good a guy he is. Multiply it by 10, and and Jim's been a great friend to me. He's been helpful. He followed every day. He was following. I got 2 or 3 text messages from at the Olympic trials, and then Kirby actually sat down and helped me sign the best boy, who was the friend of the year this year, Jake McGahee. He came over. Kirby was on his way out of town for an hour. If people ever doubt Kirby, I'll tell them this. He was friends with 2 guys that I had on the team, my 2 captains. One of whom was the Jasper Dorsey Award winner as the outstanding male student. The other one is now a VP at Procter & Gamble. He got his MBA at Yale. Those were the guys that Kirby hung around. So we have a smart football coach. And I'll tell you what, it's fun watching all these guys. And for me, it's almost like a Walter Mitty dream, just coming down here in the fall of 1970. Next thing you know, I just love talking with these guys and listening to stories, and just love being around them. It's a great group of people.
That's pretty awesome, man. I'll tell you, swimming is, again, a fascinating sport. And, you strike me, Coach Bauerle, as someone that, swimming is what you coach, but a good coach is a great coach is a great coach. And my guess is that you probably could have coached many sports successfully had you chosen. Swimming was just fortunate to get you. So I guess I would ask you this, as far as how the quote unquote non-revenue sports, about football, obviously, here at Georgia, and to a little lesser degree, basketball, men's and women, both. You see the television sports, even softball with Coach Champer taking Georgia to a 5th World Series. That gets played, baseball. But sometimes sports like tennis, like track, like swimming, they don't really happen in the shadows because there's plenty of people paying attention. These are international sports and athletes that are, as you said, well-kept secret. The best professional swim club in the world is in Athens. The University of Georgia will have more swimmers representing Team USA. The most powerful team in all the Olympics is based with Georgia Bulldog former athletes. So you've done a sensational job, but we don't really see all the attention. And I kind of wonder also, how do scholarships work? How many scholarships do you have to work with in swimming? And I know in other sports, some athletes get full scholarships, some get percentages. How does it break down in swimming?
Swimming is exactly that. We are an equivalency sport, just like baseball. And singularly, it is the hardest thing in coaching, because you have kids that come in and then they improve, and next thing you know, you're in arbitration with the parents.
Right.
So,
right.
You do your job, you help the kid try to get better. Next thing you know, everybody wants more, right? And So you try to keep it as equal as you possibly can, but you have to field a team, with, 80% kids, 40% kids. I've had 40 kids that have come in on 40% scholarships that ended up as NCAA champions. Matter of fact, Nick Fink, who just won the Olympic trials in the 200-meter breaststroke, he's right now ranked second in the world. When he came in, I had a 40% scholarship waiting for him. I just told him this. Now, he's 27 now, but I just told him the story this year. And he came in on his recruiting trip. I had 40% put away. And then we had the kids all together over one of the coach's house playing basketball. He was in bare feet. He went up and dunked it with two hands, and he's only about 6'2". And I said, well, I think that's a 65% scholarship. So
based off a dunk, seriously?
Absolutely. I based it entirely. One thing, I just happened to look over. I saw him go up like this, and I looked at his bare feet. I said, okay, I can work with that. Yeah.
Fantastic athlete.
It's hard. To answer your question, Mike, we're on 9.9 for the men. It's the gender equity part of things, 14.0 for the women. And it's hard. Baseball has it tough too. And everyone does. And, it's nice. If there was one thing the NCAA should change is if you're here, this is what you're on. It's the same as everybody else. That would be nice.
Yeah, well, I was going to say, it looks like there's going to be changes, but I'm just not sure. I understand the concept of paying players, and certainly you don't want people to come and perform and not reward them, properly. But the decision today that the Supreme Court made, I guess my buzzword for the day is unintended consequences, right? I just have a feeling there's going to be some unintended consequences with the Supreme Court, dealing out this decision that, the athlete's pay model can be changed. They affirmed a ruling today that provides for an incremental increase in how college athletes can be compensated. And this opens the door for all sorts of legal challenges in the future. And I guess where I'm going with this is if you start paying athletes, how do you, A, maintain a level playing field from program A to program B to program C? And then B, how do we ensure that Title IX, which is in place to make sure that women have the same opportunity as men, and to the point where you said that the scholarships are balanced out, how do we maintain Title IX and a level playing field when the doors open now for athletes to be paid? And again, I know you've been training, and I know you haven't necessarily sat down and gone through the books on this one, but I guess I would just ask you the knee-jerk reaction. What could be some of the long-term questions that we would have to answer, or concerns that you would have as a guy that's been around college sports a long time?
The reaction is, I can't believe this is happening, but it is. And this is what we're involved in, and it's not going to change. The other knee-jerk reaction is, how on earth are they going to sort of put a lid on this in effect, or just control how it's done? That's going to be the hardest thing, because money can come from everywhere. And, and then you have this inequity too with, if you have like you were just talking, Title IX, what happens if you have a male basketball player and a great women's basketball player? And then also, how much is going to be enough? So and also for me as a coach, the part that makes me the most uneasy is the dynamics on a team. If someone's getting this, someone's getting that, someone's that, boy, that's a mess. I mean, it's hard enough putting winning teams together, because you try to make sure everything is fair, equitable, but all of a sudden there's something else thrown in there that really the coach does not control.
Right. It's interesting. Coach Rick said a lot of the same things, especially about the challenges this is going to present in the locker room. And I would guess even more so in the non-revenue sports, where the scholarships already aren't even. And, I'll tell you, an athlete that I thought a lot about this last weekend, and There was a story that broke last week. July 1st is when the name, image, likeness bill kicks in. Obviously, Georgia trying to stay competitive with Florida and California. I mean, you got to kind of do what these other states are doing. You don't want to lose your edge in recruiting talent, as you know. You can be a great coach, but you still got to recruit great talent, as you outlined. Your theory is, hey, you want to win championships too. I mean, you and Kirby Smart have that in common. You're here to win, man. You're here to represent the G and get the best kids that you can to represent the program. And in passing this bill, it was Georgia saying, we don't want to fall behind. If Florida can do this, we've got to do this. We've got to match it. So I understand why it was passed. But Onward Reserve, a local company, Buckhead-based, they identify, apparently they've got 5 athletes they're going to approach on July 1st once this thing kicks in. And one of them was Matthew Bowling. And I was told by somebody that when that report came out, it really, I don't want to say it freaked out Bowling because I don't want to speak for him, but, here's a kid just trying to compete at nationals. And now he's in headlines for name, image, likeness, and potential offers that he's not even aware of. And what did that do to the dynamics? And what does that do, Coach, to the pressure for Matthew Bowling now? I wonder because, Matthew hasn't qualified for the Olympics yet, and yet there's an endorsement. I just wonder how much more this puts on a kid, kind of one of those be careful what you wish for things. And I guess I would ask you that because you've seen the pressures from the first time they swim for you or that you show up recruiting at a meet for a high school kid that's interested in Georgia, all the way to the other end of the spectrum when they're in the blocks looking over at Michael Phelps, right? So what is this extra NIL? Do you think this dynamic could play a role for some of the student athletes pressure-wise?
A kid like Bowling, who's still really young, it's going to be really hard. But I, from what I've heard, I don't know him. I've met him maybe in passing, but I know a lot about him because I know Petros. And but I think if I'm looking at it from my point of view as a swimming coach, if I have what we call a thoroughbred and someone's going to be in the Olympic Games and has a shot at a medal, I'm a little bit nervous just because the pressure's already there. When kids are really good at something, the pressure's there. It's self-imposed. And then you're adding another element from the outside, especially on the financial part. I think it's going to be tough. I think it's going to be hard on some kids, and I think some kids are not going to react well to it. And I think it's going to, my biggest concern is what it's going to do within the confines of a team. That's what I would be, and it's much more complicated for football because they have so many, but they also have, and they're more visible. So I don't think my problems are not football problems or basketball problems. I mean, we're driven by football here, and gladly so. I love every minute of it, and I could talk to you about a million times about games. My 3 favorite games I ever watched in our stadium, and I remember every play. But it's going to be a mess, and I'm just going to sit back. Oh, here's what I do know: I have no control over it whatsoever. So, but I'd be remiss if I didn't. I brought this out tonight. Can you see that, Mike?
Yeah, that class for the G. Oh, yeah, I love it. I see the.
That's the dog going off the block. That's the Jack Davis one that was done in the 70s. And, he passed, he passed, I don't know, maybe about 5 or 6 years ago now. But Jack did that for us. And that is singularly the most famous logo in college swimming. And
that is awesome. I love that. That's awesome. Well, without getting into the plays, you've dangled it out there in front of us, Coach. Without getting into all the plays in the games, what were your 3 favorite Georgia football games?
Ironically, one of them was a loss, and Coach Dooley and I have had more than one conversation about it. And in 1971, in the fall, we were undefeated, and so was Auburn. They had Pat Sullivan, Beasley. We lost 35-20. We actually went down. They were down 21, and we scored a touchdown. We missed the extra point. But the very ensuing, the next series, 2 of our defense, they were from the 20. Touchback back then it brought the ball out to the 20. Right. I think it was second down, maybe third, but I'm pretty sure it was second down. Receiver went out, Beasley went out. 2 of our defensive backs collided. It was 28-20. The game was done. Most beautiful day maybe ever in that stadium, and the most highly charged stadium I've ever seen, except 76 when we shut out Alabama 21-0. And that was fun. And they were undefeated. We were undefeated, and they didn't score. Ray Goff was tremendous in that one. Matt Robinson, our backup quarterback. And then you're going to love this. Well, the other one was, and I can't stand them. In the trade school, the enemy, the eternal enemy, when we beat them in 78 and we came back and beat them 29-28, that was great on a 2-point conversion. And people forget about the biggest thing on that happened in that thing. They actually came down the field, and then David Archer, who played about 5 plays the entire year, intercepted the ball, and I think he ended up, Mike, going as a quarterback over at West Georgia. But he was in for like a nickel D, and he made the biggest interception ever against Georgia Tech. Stories like that are great. And the one that I really love, though, didn't happen here. It happened in Jacksonville, and it's not the one you think. It's the year after. I've watched that 5 times this summer. What Herschel did in that game will never be seen again. And he carried it at least 44 times. When it was 3rd and 8, he ran for 9. I mean, it was just, if someone just wants to take a look at a little bit of Herschel, don't just go to that game and watch this 3rd and 4th quarter. You'll see everything that made him special. And I'll tell you, in my lifetime, I think there are about 3 people that I've watched that I would say it was a privilege to watch. Herschel was one. Dr. J was the other. Roger Federer was the third. It was just something different about all of them. And they had a grace and a beauty to what they did also. Herschel could outrun somebody. You didn't see anything change. He just put a little bit more pressure on us, like he did when he ran the guy when we beat South Carolina 13-7, and he should have won that was awful. He should have won the Heisman his freshman year.
No doubt about it. He was just awarded the Freshman Legacy Award. I had the honor of presenting him that in New Orleans a couple of years ago. And as graceful as he was on the field, Coach, he's just as graceful in person. You just get the feeling what he did with the bobsled. I mean, the MMA fighting. Part of me wonders, did you ever just want to see what he'd done in the pool, man? Because this guy looked like Superman to me.
He was friends with a couple of kids on my team. He's funny, but he's so personable. And, I've seen him a couple times, when here at some functions, and he comes right up. It's so respectful all the time, Coach, and he always wants to check out the ring, and all that stuff. He was something. You can't even put, it's almost inexplicable what he meant to us when we watched him every time. And, you sort of just wanted to see Herschel do something. I mean, and there's some other stories, and, he couldn't stand a couple of schools we can't stand. He really wanted to do well. And but I think that's something we might not ever see again. And if we don't, that's okay, because that's a one-time thing. And everybody it was, I don't know, it was almost like a spiritual experience. It's unbelievable watching them. But it's fun to pick up those games, and then but those games stuck out in particular with me as exceptional games to watch, and they were well played. And then it was we had the only thing wrong with that Auburn game. That was the year that game won the Heisman Trophy for Phil Sullivan. Pat Sullivan. I mean, and we had a Sullivan on our own team who was a defensive back, and we had some great players there. Don Golden, Sullivan. Just so many, Roy Smith. We had some great players then. It was fun to watch. And anyhow, it's fun to be a part of it. It's fun to watch everything here, whether it's basketball. I was here, when I got to see Pete Maravich play, and I think one year he averaged 44 points a game without a three-point line. But still, it's funny, Mike, and still in our history, our second black athlete ever was Ronnie Hogue, and he still has the scoring record for Georgia in single game, 46 points. He was from D.C. Yep.
Oh, wow. It was cool. It was cool to hear you drop Coach Goff's name. I'm a big proponent of Ray being in the Circle of Honor. That's one of the great mysteries of Georgia to me. And Ray Goff, when I think about being the SEC Player of the Year, and I know they have this All-American thing. I said, look, man, this guy was the SEC Player of the Year. That trumps any All-American team. And a guy that served as Coach Dooley's assistant for years, a guy that recruited Kirby Smart. I mean, if Ray doesn't give Kirby that scholarship on signing day, I'm not sure if Troy State didn't got a hell of a program right now. I mean, he was the last Scully in that class. And, I had Ray and Kirby on a show about a year ago, and Kirby brought it up. He said, yeah, Steve Johnson. Ray said, I'd have found a place for you. And Kirby said, I don't know about that, Coach. But, Ray Goff, you think about the guys he recruited and the offense that he had with Eric Zier and Garrison Hurst. And, it was a tough time, and Florida was dominating. But I just think about the man, how much he loves Georgia, what he meant to Georgia, and the role he played as a quarterback. And I said, golly, I look up in that Circle of Honor, and I said, man, Ray Goff, come on, somewhere, some way, Coach. I just hope Coach Goff can get in there.
I'm on that committee, and it's funny. I was put on that committee by Coach Dooley, and then Coach McGill was part of it too at that time. And I'll never forget the story, but I agree with that because, All-American's All-American, but Player of the Year in the SEC, that's a step above.
It is.
And I think this is just, if this appeases at people on the outside, it's certainly being discussed.
That's awesome.
Ray is probably the most generous person. And I don't know anyone more generous with his time and what he has to give to anybody else in my lifetime ever. But anyhow, we'll make a move to that. That's for sure. But I went on originally as the women's representative, and then Coach Dooley at one of the meetings said, "Well, Jack, I appreciate you helping us, and but we'll have to replace you with somebody else." And then Coach McGill said, "Well, Jack should go on now as the men's representative and ad infinitum." So next thing you know, I've been on forever.
That's awesome. What a great committee. Coach, I can't thank you enough for your time tonight. Didn't necessarily intend on chatting this long, but man, some great stories, some great memories, some perspective that we can't get from anyone else. Being the dean of SEC coaches, producing so many champions, having such a great understanding of working with young people and doing it with the class that the pros want to come. The college isn't enough. The pros want to come and work with you in Athens. And what a tribute that is to the program that you've built and the career that you've maintained. I'm not retiring you here. Hey, look, man, I'm not trying to say, what a great job. You're still doing it. It ain't over, right? Georgia, these guys got their hooks in you. They ain't going to let you go, Coach Bauerle. They're going to keep you around, man.
Georgia gave me my family our lives. So when I came down here in the fall of 70, actually in the spring of 70 on my recruiting trip, I was here about 3 or 4 hours. I had a dinner out at Swamp Guinea out near Hull, between Hull and Colbert. And then I was on a drag race on the non-completed Atlanta Highway, and I decided this was a good spot.
Well, it's been a great one, and you've done incredible things. And I'll be keeping up with these Georgia swimmers. It's so great to see Georgia with more Olympians on Team USA than any other school in the country on the most powerful team that the United States will bring to the Olympics. Coach Bauerle, thank you for your time. I want to take a moment. I'm going to take a break. When I come back, I'm going to give a spin on my football stuff. We'll let Coach Bauerle get ready for training tomorrow. He ain't letting these swimmers have a break. They got to get after it. But right now, let's take a moment for our sponsor from Ingles.
It's in our hearts to feel for you. There's been ups and downs, turnarounds, good days and some bad. But we stand together for worse and for better. We'll always have your back. With open arms, heart to heart, hand in hand. Community strong.
Oh, welcome back to the program again. Jack Bauerle, what a fascinating coach, figure, accomplished man. So thankful that, I reached out to Jake Stanley that does the SID. I said, I'd really like to get Coach on. I saw that he was appointed to coach the Olympic team. And again, I'm kind of a converted Olympics guy. I didn't really understand the dynamics involved with the Olympics until I went and covered London in 2012. And it was fascinating. And swimming in particular, as hard as the swimmers work, the camaraderie that they enjoy with one another. You heard Coach Bauerle with some really interesting thoughts on how NIL and paying athletes is going to affect sports. He talks about his locker room and the importance of building that cohesiveness. We talked about the pressure. We talk about Title IX. There's going to be a lot of unintended consequences to NIL. And this is all happening in football the same time that the one-time transfer legislation gets passed. I mean, if you're Kirby Smart, you're sitting there, and I think this is great for Kirby that he hired a guy like Will Muschamp and that he's got another former head coach on his staff like Todd Monken, some guys that have been there and done it, sat at the head of the table as they brainstorm and think, hey, what do we got to do in this one-time transfer situation? How do we work to retain players, develop players so that the second and the number 2 and the number 3 doesn't want to leave to be the number 1 somewhere else, right? And still do that within the team concept while you're trying to win championships. And what is the NIL going to do to football? So far we've heard that Brock Vandegrift and Jack Podlesny are going to be approached, I guess reportedly, by Onward Reserve for NIL deals on July 1st. Look, there's a ton of other guys that are going to get approached. That's just what we know. That's just what's been leaked out so far. What happens if one running back gets an NIL deal and the other 4 don't? Does that affect the committee approach? Are they still over there cheering? It really challenges the concept of team sport, and it challenges Kirby Smart in a different way. You could make the case that this is bad for Georgia because Georgia was already knocking on the door to get a championship as things were. Therefore, any change threatens the position that Georgia was in. And I would say Georgia, easily one of the top 5 programs in the country, top 3 programs truly, but top 5 contenders because of the Alabama hurdle. A little bit tougher for them to get in the playoffs than at Clemson or in Oklahoma, obviously. We've seen that play out. So you could make the argument that any change is bad change because Georgia kind of mastered the system. And with the $80 million football building opening up and Kirby now 5 years in, he's got some equity. He's built a program. He's built a certain tenor to that program. But I look at it a little differently. I look at Kirby as a guy who, I don't want to say meddler is not the right word, but he's constantly looking to change. I loved it. When Kirby Smart said on Feinbaum one day, if it ain't broke, find a way to make it better, I surged, right? I felt my adrenaline. I said, man, that, and then we had Ben Cleveland on the show, and he talked about playing for Kirby and hearing his pregame speeches and, how he just wants you to run, he makes you want to run through a wall, right? And when you've got a coach that's not going to be content, that says, you know what, guys, we look great, but we're going to find a way to look even better. I mean, that to me is what gives Kirby Smart and Georgia an edge moving forward, even as the rule change, even as the team management skills are going to have to be different with NIL. And how do you manage a locker room now when some guys are getting paid more than others on endorsement deals and one-time transfers? And we've seen what Kirby did in the transfer portal this last offseason. I would argue that Georgia did better for themselves in the transfer portal than any other program in the country. When you look at landing the guys like Tyke to play the star, you had to have a star, right? Tyreek Stevenson transfers to Miami. Mark Webb goes pro. So he goes out and gets an All-American from West Virginia that his defensive backs just so happen to coach. So it'll be a nice, easy transition. I look at Darian Kendrick as a cover corner there opposite of Jalen Kimber. I think Amir Speed's going to be really fighting to stay in that 3-man rotation. We know that Keely Ringo is going to be pressing for playing time as he continues to heal from that torn labrum that kept him on the sidelines all of last season. Keely getting better each week, and suddenly you look at Georgia at corner now, and even with Brandon Turnage gone, last time we heard from him, he was telling us to relax. I guess we're all still relaxed. He's not even on the roster. Maybe he's relaxed. I'm not sure where he is, but suddenly the cornerback position has been shored up. And then the one injury, the George Pickens injury in the spring, and you just shook your head and said, oh, man, is it happening to Georgia again? And then you get a guy like Eric Gilbert, a game-changing player, an impossible matchup who's trying to learn the system right now, hearing great things, though, about this Georgia pass game. Today on our DogNation.com page, I wrote about a stock report. And my stock report, I like to, judging where things are at. I say stock soaring for the football building. And if you haven't read Jeff Sentel's article on the reviews that some of the kids were given the building, it'll blow you away. Apparently they have Lamborghini seats in the Lamborghini seats. Next thing you know, with this NIL, you're going to have Lamborghini cars in the parking lot. You thought those Dodge Chargers were hot, so Lamborghini seats, a snack bar, a hyperbaric chamber. Really? I mean, this stuff, a water massage chair, not one, two. Okay. Maybe the largest weight room in the country. It's 2 stories high. I don't know if you see that video Connor O'Reilly put up today. Man, if you didn't see Connor's story about Kirby throwing up the iron, you can just see how geeked up Kirby is to be recruiting these kids and the excitement that he generates. I mean, I'm trying to guess, and I'm thinking these got to be at least 40-pound dumbbells that Kirby just grabs and just starts pumping. I'm going, Coach, you better be careful. I mean, I'm not saying that he ain't that old. He's 45, but man, I'm telling you, I've done a little bit of lifting, and you start messing around with 40 to 50-pound dumbbells like that, man, be careful there, Coach Smart. You'd be looking for a new rotator cuff. You'd be seeing, you'd be in some trouble there. And then you see that, Oscar Delp talking about the technology, and you can work out every single muscle in your body. Again, this is out of Jeff Sentel's story. I'll let you guys go to Dog Nation and read it. Jeff talked to several athletes about what this new football building has and got their reviews. And again, the Kirby video that Connor put up today is just absolutely must-see stuff. So I gave that. I said stock soaring. That's my highest grade. Georgia football building, stock soaring. Name, image, likeness. I say stock soaring for that. And it's not that I think Brock Vandegrift is going to break the bank, or Jack Podlesny, or the golfer Trent Phillips, or Matthew Bowling, or Connor Tate, the sensational baseball player out of Oconee County. It's that Georgia's out in front. It's that Georgia's athletes are being talked about. Now, they haven't been approached yet. They won't be approached till July 1st. But if you're Onward Reserve, you've hit the jackpot. You haven't even spent a penny, and you are at the forefront of the NIL as the first business just preparing to offer deals. So, I mean, what a great deal for Onward Reserve. All the publicity they've gotten for being in history. In history, they're the first business in history to make it known they're going to approach athletes. There's going to be tons of others, but you give Onward Reserve credit, and you give Drew Butler credit at Icon Source. Let me tell you, this guy was a fantastic punter, a great guy award. Georgia fans know all about Drew. His dad, Kevin Butler, played in the greatest NFL team in history with the Bears. But as a businessman, I'm really impressed. I am really impressed with Drew Butler and what he's doing. He did a great show with me last Monday. If you missed that, he explained how NIL is going to work, how these athletes are going to be approached. And I give Georgia a stock soaring for that. I think Drew probably deserves some credit for kind of being in the middle, setting up this platform where the businesses can talk to the players. Again, he doesn't represent anybody. He just creates the platform, kind of like Zillow.com with houses for sale. But Georgia appears to be on the forefront of this. And there's 6 other states that are going live on July 1. And we'll see. Mark Emmert said today that he wants all the schools to have an opportunity, have some sort of NIL rule in play. We'll see if it happens by July 1. We know for sure that it will happen in Georgia. Brian Kemp signing that bill May 6th to make sure the Georgia athletes would have that opportunity. I thought that was pretty sensational. Stock up, not stock soaring, but stock up, one level down, the college football playoff expansion. As I said, I explained before, Georgia was in pretty good position to control their own destiny. If you win the SEC title game, you're going. You ain't getting left out. Adding more teams is going to make it a little bit harder. It's going to decrease everyone's chances. Obviously, if there's only 4 teams, you got a better chance of winning it than if there's 12. But as I look at how Georgia's built, and I look at the quality of depth, and I look at the way Kirby Smart recruits and the way these Georgia teams really seem to surge in November, the more I look at it, the more I like it. And you take the decision out of the College Football Playoff Committee's hands. Now, what's done is done. The Oklahoma ADs rotated off. The Florida ADs rotated off. The committee from hell has passed by Georgia. They took the 2018 playoffs away, okay? They accomplished their mission. and you can't go back and fix it. You can't go back and change it. I can't imagine a committee that will be more loaded against Georgia than that one that just rotated off. So I think you would have been fine moving forward, but now it's automatic. Now the 6 highest ranked conference champs are in, and then the committee picks the next 6. So I think Georgia's going to be a perennial playoff team. I see it being an every year thing for the Bulldogs because I don't see Florida getting off the mat and challenging Georgia. Like I said, it took a cascade of events. It was like a plane crash last year. One thing doesn't crash an airplane. It usually takes 6, 7, 8. And that's what happened to Georgia against Florida last year. So they're going to be a perennial contender. I think the staff is a stock up. You know, I know everybody talked about Nick Williams and you know, you look on Williams' Instagram and clearly he's, you know, recruiting against Georgia. Okay, whatever. That's what he's getting paid to do. But I like David Cooper. So many positive things I've heard about David Cooper. I called my friends at Florida. They said, yeah, Mullen loved this guy. Real popular with the players. And then the recent hire, Jawan Taylor. And Jawan's only going to be an assistant player development. But, hey, Jawan Taylor's in the locker room. And I'm going to tell you, this is a locker room guy. This is a guy that understands the culture that Kirby Smart built at the University of Georgia. He was a Mark Richt recruit who grew into a Kirby Smart type of player. Really glad to see him back. And I said stock even preseason all-star teams, right? Connor did a story last week on the Walter Camp team. I said, I don't know what Walter's looking at, but George Pickens is probably not going to play till November. It just goes to show you how political and how abstract some of this can be. And listen, I think George Pickens is an All-American talent, but if he's not going to play till November at the earliest, how do you put him on the preseason team? Kind of tells you, you know, a little bit about, well, they look at last year and who's coming back that had a good season last year and projecting onto this year. I think a lot of really good Georgia players get left out when you do it that way. And I did a story about that, about how Georgia football talent goes well beyond those lists that you see. So looking at some of your comments here, I see Moose Thomas on there. Moose, thanks for joining us tonight. I appreciate that. You know, good to see a lot of these guys. Rich Olnick was out there as well tonight. A lot of fun. I like to have different guests on here. I like to get a different perspective. And I'm going to tell you, you know, Jack was fantastic. The stories that he told, the perspective that he gave us on an Olympic sport, because the Olympics are coming, man. Tokyo Olympics, I believe, next month. I want to say July 23rd through August 8th, right around the corner, and great Georgia representation. Keep an eye out this week. You're going to see more Georgia track athletes qualifying for the Olympics. Matthew Bowling didn't make it in the 100 Sunday. Matthew Bowling will try to get in the finals on Friday. And I think you've got 5 or 6 Georgia track athletes that have already qualified for the Olympics. So we're gonna put a wrap on it tonight. I want to thank everyone for watching the show. I want to thank producers Michael Carvel and Carna Riley. We're trying a little different technology. Apologize if we were a few minutes late. Did our best to get the show on and give you, like I said, some different perspective. And obviously, you know, Coach Bauerle, what a fantastic job he's done. The dean of SEC coaches, 43 years. 43 years he's led the program. And, you know, there's only one Jack Bauerle, and I'm so glad and so proud to say that we had him on our Ingles on the Beach show. I hope it was a treat for you, just like it was a treat for me. Everybody have a wonderful week. And thanks again. Thanks to the sponsor, Ingles. And we'll be talking to you guys again real soon.